The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus said to his disciples, I have come to set the earth on fire, and how I wish it were already blazing. There is a baptism with which I must be baptized, and how great is my anguish until it is accomplished. Do you think that I have come to establish peace on the earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. From now on, a household of 5 will be divided, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. A father will be divided against his son, and a son against his father. A mother against her daughter, and a daughter against her mother. A mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
So I'm curious if anyone here has heard of the jazz musician, the trumpeter Miles Davis. Anyone heard of Miles Davis? The youngsters are probably scratching their heads. But Miles Davis, 60 years ago, released an album. That's a record album for the youngsters too. It was titled Kind of Blue. It is the best-selling jazz album. To this day, it still sells thousands of copies. And this masterpiece influenced the world back then. It influenced different styles of music, rock and roll, classical, because the musicians will appreciate this more likely than anyone else. But that album is based on improvisation around the scales as opposed to chord progressions. And so it was as if this album back then, 60 years ago, set the earth on fire in a way. Now, that's not to say that everyone became jazz enthusiasts because of it, right? But many did, and many, because of this album, it changed them inside. It changed the way they did their music, performed their music, created it. You know, Jesus says, I have come to set the earth on fire. And he finishes with, I wish already was ablaze, right? And I've heard this week, as the staff has talked about this gospel, I've heard individuals who I've talked to sharing their challenge with this gospel, struggling to hear. They hear the words of Jesus, and it's making them wonder, come to set the earth on fire. He wishes it was already ablaze. I thought Jesus came to establish peace in the world, love. He's promoting division in families, they were saying. Well, as I've shared with the children, and the one aspect I will focus on in this homily is the fact that ultimately the fire is the Holy Spirit. It is God. It is Jesus. He's telling his disciples then, he's telling us today, allow them in. Allow God to guide us in all things. Yes, there will be disagreements with others about faith, with family, with friends, but those times we're called to be witnesses in love, to share our truth, defend the faith. Let the fire burn within. The second reading reminds us to persevere in the race, and the psalm reminds us, we all sang it, come to our aid, to constantly come to our aid. I feel like I've preached this sermon many times. But how many have heard of Paul Harvey? This is really like a dated homily, isn't it? Youngsters, you can Google Paul Harvey. There is the rest of the story. Because you see, when Jesus spoke these words 2,000 years ago, in Aramaic, the word for earth is the same word as earth oven or stove earth stove. I have come to set the earth oven on fire. The people of that time would hear that, and they would know how their earth ovens worked back then. You didn't own your own oven in your home. It was a community oven in the village. It was a community event to keep the oven going when needed. And what do you think? I'll tell you what it was. The most available fuel for oven at that time, and in parts of the country still today, more plentiful than wood in the region. It is camel and donkey dung mixed with salt. I'll repeat that one more time. Camel and donkey dung mixed with salt, formed into patties. Aren't you glad you live today? So they would take a slab of salt, put the slab in the bottom of the oven, place the fuel patties on top, and start the fire. And what would occur is a catalytic reaction between the salt surfaces that increased the heat. The people would know this. And so Jesus is saying, I have come to set the earth oven on fire. I am the catalyst that causes the fire to burn within. I am the supernatural reaction that will light your heart on fire if you will let me in. My disciples, my people, will you let me in your oven? Will you allow me to inflame your heart? Will you, in turn, inflame the hearts of others? Will you?